Hey, neighbor, hey. I am Winnie Wilkinson, and I invite you to join my live talk show in St. Albans, Vermont, for candid conversations about our community, including its strengths and weaknesses, with opportunities to call in. Winnie Wilkinson, and I am the host of Hey Neighbor Hey. And today we are so blessed to have Pastor Devon, however you want to pronounce that, with us today. And our topic today is poverty in, I guess, America, because it's all over America, as well as the LGBTQ
Q.
plus um, community and how we can work together. And he's going to bring a different perspective to the topic, as well as he's also ordained and he could marry people that want to be married as well. So I'm going to hand it over
Yeah,
to you.
absolutely. Well, I am a pastor serving in South Burlington, Vermont, and you're absolutely right. I think that the religious perspective often is one that isn't necessarily sought after nowadays, and I think that there really is a real conflict within the religious and particularly the Christian community here in this country as to the direction that we should take morally when it comes to lifting up our brothers and sisters, our neighbors in our communities. And I think that too often people are using the teachings of Christianity in a way that really just sort of sets up barriers between our neighbors, gives us an excuse to be violent or hateful to our neighbors. And that really doesn't sit well with me as a person who tries to follow the example of Jesus Christ. So when it comes to issues of the rising poverty rate that we see here in Vermont, that is something that I've been trying to be very involved with for almost 8 years now. And I think that along those lines, there's always been not, not along those lines, along a different line. Progressive churches within the state have been trying very hard to be supportive of the LGBTQ plus community because they also are getting targeted. And I think that the focus on taking away the rights of our neighbors is something that we all should be concerned with. I had a professor who told me that, you know, as a black person here in this country, where do we get the right to advocate and push for our own civil liberties if we're not willing to work to protect the civil liberties of others? And
Of
so,
all.
exactly, exactly. So that's kind of where I come from, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, I believe too that God creates everyone, every human being, as well as animals. But we, as human beings, we are more intelligent, and so we should be able to reach out to our neighbor with love and with openness. Because in your neighbor's world, maybe you are different as well. And your neighbor is still trying to reach out to you. So, on that premise, how do you see us working this where neighbor and neighbor could coexist to exist?
Well, I think that that's going to take a lot of discussion between people of different backgrounds, just sort of honestly sharing the struggles that we have with one another. I think a good example is, folks who have wealth and means. Very often, we live in a sort of bubble of a bubble of privilege. It's good to have conversations with people who are struggling, people who are the working poor. And not just that, it's good to be able to see what people are struggling with on a daily basis. As a pastor, I can't really claim to be a person that's surrounded by wealth, but fortunately, I do have have a job that gets me into communities trying to help people who are struggling, and it doesn't give me a full picture of what people are going through when they don't have a place to live. But at the very least, I get to hear stories, stories of people who are struggling just to find warm clothes so that they can get through the winter, or people who are struggling because they had their tent burned down while they were sleeping in it with all their possessions in it, and after getting out of the hospital they have to start again. And I think that until you're really able to get to know a few people who are coming from a different place in life than you are, it's really easy to convince yourself that they do not have humanity, that they are somehow an enemy to you. They are somehow a threat to your community. And I worry at times the way in which people are treating folks, especially people who are homeless, more and more here in Vermont, less as neighbors who need help, but more as a threat that needs to be driven out. And the stories that I hear about everyday Vermonters, the things that people say or do to folks who are unfortunate and find themselves without means to support themselves. It is disturbing for me as a person who has tried to dedicate himself to a gospel that preaches that we should love not just God but also our neighbor. So I think that we really do need to put into practice those neighborly values that bring community together if we're going to get through tough times like these.
Yeah, tough times like these, tough indeed. As a foreigner, or as a human being that was not born on U.S. soil, and to see other people's perspective of what America is, in terms of, you will hear things like, America is one of the richest countries on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. However, we do have an emergency housing problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not caused by immigrants coming across the border. That is not one of the reasons why. And if we look at this in a more broader picture, we will find that each one just need a listening ear.
Mm-hmm.
I got you. I understand. And how can we assist you? Because the word help, in my opinion, and in doing some of the research that I'm doing now, the word help is loosely used.
Right.
So I have purposely determined that I am going to use the word assist.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a problem, I may have some resources, and we are assisting each other. One, I must use these resources in order to get more resources. We don't have the resources, not going to just sit there. So we are assisting in serving a goal in this in our community, in the world, as a matter of fact, because it's difficult all over. And what are your opinions in terms of how can we not make it us and them, than a we working together?
Well, I think that I'm, especially when we're talking about the crisis that we have here in the state when it comes to the rising rates of poverty, I don't know the solution to that problem. The only thing that I have faith that the solution of that problem comes through community.
Yes.
As a minister of a church, it's usually very clear to clergy that the most basic social safety net that we have in society is community.
Yes.
It's a neighbor looking out for another neighbor. And we individually only have so many resources that we can give. And so the larger the community that you have, the more resources that you have.
Yes.
I think that you are right. People sometimes use the term help loosely. And when we expect somebody, when we have a problem, I think often sometimes we feel like we expect somebody else to solve it for us. I think that a lot of people point to our local governments and they say, why aren't you dealing with this issue? And I do think that our governments could be doing more to address issues of poverty. You know, we need more transitional housing. We need more shelters. We need programs that will keep people off the street long enough so that they can build their lives back up. And we need programs that will help get people from that position of being on the street into a job and employed and contributing back to society. But government alone probably is not going to have the resources to do that. You need an alliance of government, community, businesses, and I do think that we've gotten ourselves into enough of a hole where we really are going to need that type of alliance if we're really going to start to push back against the level of crisis that we're seeing right now. So how do we build those alliances? I think that the first step is, you know, we need to come together around people who are already engaged in dealing with those issues. So in Burlington, we have groups like CVOEO, we have groups like COTS or JUMP, and you know, these are groups that work on the ground to help people who are struggling with poverty. We also have our local housing trusts, which are working to build affordable housing and to help get people into housing. You know, we have people who are already dedicated to this work. I think that, you know, taking time to say, hey, how can I contribute the resources to help with these problems, to help with the work that's being done? I think that is a first step. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, it's a faith statement. You know, you don't always know where the path will take you,
Yes.
but you hope that by doing the best that you can and doing it with an intention of love, you'll end up making a positive impact.
Yes, that was well put together. Something that I personally struggle with is that a group of people may get together to plan something or to try to facilitate a good in the community. However, the people who are affected
Mm-hmm.
by what they're planning is never at the table. So
Absolutely.
they don't get a statistic from the person who, for example, and as I go around town, one day it was raining, and because people now have to take their tents with them and their belongings with them, there was this exodus of people in the United States of America
Mm-hmm.
in 2024 with tents on the back, they backpack, and they walking in the rain because at that time there was a situation over at one of the places that they could have stayed, and they were closed down for a while. However, they were like walking in the rain with their belongings.
Yeah.
In my opinion, from a humane point of view, other places could have had an emergency meeting or emergency phone call. They could come here and stay for the day, providing that they follow the rules,
Mm-hmm.
instead of them walking the streets and displaying that. Now the bandstand in the park
Mm-hmm.
is all secure around with tape. Nobody could go in there on a rainy day. So there are little things that you look at from a humane point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And you said if they had brought some of these people in, or not even in to sit at the table, but do a survey involving these people, then you will get a added perspective of what the decisions you're about to make, how it will affect their lives.
Well, to answer to respond to what you first said about how people often try to help without asking what it is that's needed. I think that is a very common thing that you see in, you know, in just anybody. I myself have been guilty of that from time to time. I like to assume that I know all the answers. It feels comfortable, feeling like you know all the answers, even for the person that you're trying to help, to the point where you sometimes forget that they're the one that knows what they need more than you do. And so very often I have, you know, been in situations where, you know, we want to be the good neighbor. We try to offer up something that is not needed. And it can be really off-putting when somebody tells you, you know, that's not what I need, that's not helpful, because you're trying to be helpful. But this is the reason why I said it's very important for us to be in conversation with each other. And it's also very important for us to work with people who are already doing the work, because very often they are the ones who have had the conversations and know the things that need to be done. When I first started getting into housing advocacy, there was a person who ran a shelter in my area, and she told me, you know, this is the thing that we need to be focusing on first: housing first.
Yes.
And because people can't start rebuilding their lives if they're constantly worrying about where they're going to be sleeping.
Yes.
People need a home base from which they can start pulling things together. And that's not something that would have occurred to me if it had not been taught to me. And so I'm trying to, in regards to the second part of what you were saying, where should people go? I do think that also needs to be a conversation that we have with communities.
Yeah.
So within the clergy community in the Burlington area, some churches would be able to facilitate, people staying for a little bit. But other churches have programs where that wouldn't be possible. For instance, my congregation uses its space to offer affordable rental space for daycares. In order to address that problem, we have made ourselves a place where there are children on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And when you invite people who are struggling, you invite all of their struggle.
Yes.
And that sometimes includes drug abuse, and it can involve relationships that are dysfunctional. These things can seem very off-putting to those of us who are in stable living situations, but I think we need to keep in mind that even those of us in stable living situations have lives that sometimes seem pretty messed up.
Yes.
And the difference is that when you have a home, you have walls that can hide that drama. But when you're living out in the open, it's just there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
And so, when you invite somebody who is struggling into a place of shelter, you need to keep in mind that you're inviting all of them.
Yes.
And you are committing to helping all of them, no matter how difficult that is. And I do think, again, when we do things like we invite people in and we say, hey, let's, welcome to this space. We invite you in. Sometimes we assume we know what we're doing. We assume that, we're inviting this person in. They're going to be. They're not going to be intrusive. They're not. I'm not going to have to. It's not going to change my life in any way. That's naive, because when we say that we are helping a neighbor, we are. That is a deep commitment.
Yes, it is. Selfless commitment.
It is, and I think that we need to those who say that they want to help, they need to really think about what that means if they are going to offer that help, and that help is needed.
Exactly why I moved from the word help to assist.
Right.
Because with working with different organizations and different projects, my experience is what the help that is given looks like to this person that you're trying to help is totally different. And that would lead me to another topic within this, the poverty struggle and the housing struggle that keeps me up sometimes, is the fact that the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if, for example, a person comes up in a home or an environment where they were told they're never going to be anything, they went to school, you're never going to be anything, and bring this cuss word, bring that. When you bring that person into your home without a social aspect
Mm-hmm.
of what is the social norm in your environment, which may be a social norm that is different in their environment,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to bring their environment into your environment,
Yeah.
as well as you bringing your environment into their environment.
Yeah. I think that American society and Vermont society, we definitely have certain stigmas around poverty.
Yeah.
A lot of folks who fall into poverty or situations where they are, when you fall into that trap of poverty, sometimes people are slow to ask for help. And it's, I don't know if that is, I don't know if I would say that that's a social thing or not, but it definitely is a common thing. People don't want to be perceived as needing help. People want to be perceived as being self-sufficient, being able to stand on their own feet. And that goes beyond just asking for financial help. If you're struggling if you're struggling with poverty, I am in a family where I can't afford to go out and eat regularly. I have parishioners who like to go out and eat regularly. I sometimes have to turn them down. They sometimes offer to pay for my lunch. It doesn't feel good to accept
Right,
that.
right.
And again, I think that it's one of the things that it's sometimes helpful to do is to ask ourselves, well, how do we overcome that struggle to ask for help? Because I think you're right. There is an element of shame when it comes to asking for help. And maybe that's more prevalent in certain parts of the world than in others. And I think one of the things that, at least one of the things that I often struggle with, at least through examining faith, is the realization that there are ways in which you can give, even if you are not the one, even if you are the one that's struggling.
Yes.
And even, I guess the best way I can put it is, opening up those lines of dialogue.
Yes.
There are folks within this world who have the experience needed to really understand what needs to be changed within the world. There are those who have gone through times of struggle. There are those there are those who are still in times of struggle.
Yeah.
Who, if they were heard, would be able to direct those who have the ability to assist, to use their power in a way that actually has an impact on the problems that we have.
Yes. Yes. And again, it brings us back to being human.
Mm-hmm.
And I have developed ways now where I would learn to, first I was, as soon as you tell me something, I'm ready to help you to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I moved from the word help
Right.
to assist, because you will not know every aspect as to what brought the person there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the little information that you have, I can own my stuff. is that I was a very judgmental and condemnation kind of person. Well, I came to the U.S. as an immigrant, and I did this, and then I realized, wait a minute.
Well, I also think what we're seeing is, and forgive me if this strikes a little bit too close to home, but it's very difficult to open up with your problems when you don't feel like your problems are welcome.
Yes.
And so it's kind of a situation of, are we going, are we the place where all people are welcome here?
No, it's not.
And are we a place where all problems are welcome here?
No, it's not.
And I think that one of the things that I really value, especially having lived in Vermont from a young age, is a lot of people, Vermonters, want to be that place. We might make the mistake of thinking we already are that place, but we definitely want to be that place. And if we are willing to put in the work, I think that we can be that place. But it's hard work.
Yes.
And often that means that we need to ask ourselves, are we really living, are we really the type of people that we think we are?
Yes.
Are we the type of people who can see a person who is taking drugs on the street, and instead of immediately condemning them as a drug addict, be aware that there are a lot of factors that lead somebody choosing that over the constant pain of having to struggle through a system that doesn't seem to see you at all,
Right,
or
to
want
see
to help
them,
you.
right. And that would bring me to something that has changed my life. I know of a very prominent person now in the community who was, and I'm so proud to say was, on drugs. And I would listen to how other people within the church would, say, "Oh, don't pray for her anymore because as soon as she gets up, she's gonna go get high or whatever." And I could remember at a convention, this young lady said to me, "I will get through this. I believe I could get through this." And I could remember looking at her and I said, "I am there with you." And every time I would always reach out to her with love, understanding, and we will get through stuff. And today this young lady will talk about her situation and say, "I was." And so sometimes when she's counseling someone and this person says, "Oh, well, you don't know what it is," and she would say, "I do know. Been
Well,
there."
I think, again, it's recognizing people for who they are. And no matter what community you're in, you're going to get a variety of people. And that includes the homelessness community.
Yes.
There are a lot of people in the homeless community who want to be helped and are willing to work to be helped and to get out of their situation.
Yes.
But there are also those who are not really looking to be helped. And that's the same in any community. And it's hard for me to explain, but I think that very often we look at the few cases where we can't help people, and we use that as justification not to help those who really are authentically looking for help. In Burlington right now, there is a public safety situation because there are gangs that and drug dealers that have moved in and integrated into the homeless community. That's not everybody within the homeless community. A lot of people within the homeless community are authentically looking for help and need our compassion. And I think that even for those who are in a place where they're not really seeking help, it's good for us to know that there's probably a reason for them being there, but we do need to ask ourselves, are we willing to help those who are asking for our help?
Yes. On touching on a person showing up at a place and is not necessarily seeking help, deep down within in their subliminal mind, in my experience helping in the Winooski area and with the different cultural pieces, A person will not go to a soup kitchen to hang out.
Yeah.
A person will not go to COV when when they're giving out coats
Yeah.
just because.
Well, I think that when your experiences of being in poverty or having people chase you off of properties, call you a cockroach, or say that you are a danger to society, it's hard to trust social institutions.
Yes.
It's hard to trust anybody, really, that anybody is going to help you. And so the way in which we engage with people who are struggling, and unfortunately, it's making more and more headlines. The negative ways in which we engage with people who are struggling do give people reasons not to feel safe asking for help.
Especially, I know of one incident where someone went to a non-for-profit organization here in St. Albans, and because they are friends with the person's ex-landlord,
Hmm.
this organization gave the ex-landlord all the information of the interaction at this non-for-profit organization.
Hmm.
Hence, this person doesn't go there anymore.
Yeah. And again, it's no matter where we are in society,
Excuse
at the end of the day, it's human beings trying to help other human beings or being human beings. And so we find that there are missteps, there are abuses of power, there are and there is also authentic love all mixed together.
Yeah.
And it's not a perfect system, and often it looks like a total mess. Again, I think that's a part of the no problem. Bless you.
Yeah, no, right? I need to.
I think that's that's a part of that is once we start seeing things get messy.
Yes.
Instead of that's probably where it's time for us to to check ourselves and ask ourselves, is it really okay for me to disconnect, to give up, or do I need to have faith that somehow we as a community will be able to sort out this mess, or at least get it less messy and more helpful?
Yes, yes. The I could speak about St. Albans because I have a I speak to a lot of people here in St. Albans as well. Some of the places where people could go for help, your privacy in spite of a person being homeless or on probation or whatever, their privacy with every interaction
Yeah.
is showing them that you're safe. Now, when an organization gives out that kind of vibe, I would read that as a place where only certain people are welcome.
Yeah. And so that's not wrong. There are certain organizations that, for instance, require a person not to be on drugs if they're going to get assistance with them. And I think again, I don't know if that's. There have been times where I've criticized that, where I've said if you're going to help somebody, you should help all people. But I am aware that there are that sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what do we have the capacity to give?
Yeah.
Because we individually or even organizations are not unlimited resources. And so you have to ask yourself, where can my assistance make the biggest impact? So I don't know whether or not an organization that chooses to limit its assistance to a certain demographic that's still in need, but maybe not as in need. I personally, honestly, don't know how I feel about that.
Right.
But I can understand that.
Yeah, and when you take a job, some jobs is a selfless job because if you only look at that job in the parameters of what is documented at that time for them to come up with this job description. But then, for example, post COVID,
Mm.
job descriptions has not changed.
Yeah.
And that is a huge problem. For example, if a person does go to the post office to
Mhm.
get a mailbox, they have to have an address.
Well, another factor is sort of the rising water level the of the cost of living here in our state,
Yep.
and it does contribute to a situation where folks who previously were able to afford to, were able to get by living in a home, making ends meet, find themselves in more and more desperate situations, struggling to get heat, or even find themselves in a situation where they are themselves out on the street. And I think that we really do need to pay attention to what sort of living. I don't want to get. I don't want to get too political here. What sort of living opportunities that we have here? Are we a state where our children can graduate from high school, maybe if they choose to go on to college to get a higher education here, and then instead of leaving the state, can enter the workforce and be successful? I don't really think that we are that right now.
No, we're not.
And I think that as a result, we do find ourselves in a situation where our communities are getting older. Families are having to move further apart for opportunity. But we also find ourselves in a situation where people who come to the state with the promise of opportunity find themselves not being supported in laying down roots.
Yes.
And so, people who there is some truth that people come into the state and then find themselves homeless. I don't think that. I think that most of the time the intention is not to find yourself homeless.
Nope.
But you come into the state and you're like, well, I have this job, but I can't afford anything here.
Yeah.
And are we really taking care of people who are trying to start up their lives or rebuild their lives? That might be a thing that needs to be dealt with politically.
Yes. And we're going to talk now more about this is a very good conversation
Yep.
in terms of your perspective, my perspective. And I want to talk now about the marriages. I saw on your post on Facebook that you will be open to marrying same-sex marriages.
Yes.
And what does that look like?
Well, that looks like, given the direction that our country is going in and the legal threats to same-sex marriage, there are likely couples out there who would like to legally get married fast. And so there are clergy around this state, myself included, who are willing to do that service for free.
Okay.
And hopefully, in being able to do that, provide some security to folks who are in same-sex relationships or even transgender relationships,
Yes.
to be able to basically find some security in their lives going forward.
All right.
We definitely have been living through the LGBTQ plus community has fought for visibility, for visibility and for equality, and it's only recently, really, that people have started to recognize our own biases, and to affirm that this community is a community of people who are able to love and contribute, and it's filled with fine people, just as much as any other community, and they deserve their civil liberties.
They're human beings. That's the way I look at them.
And I absolutely recognize that there are factions within Christianity and the church that want to take that away. I do not agree that there is a biblical grounds for doing it, though.
Right. And the point is, what will people do if when you die or you no longer on earth, but when you go over, cross over, then the very thing that you detest is what is the norm.
Well, the thing about especially Christian faith is when you are reading through the gospel, when you're listening to the words of Jesus, even the apostles or even Paul, they're very clear. We human beings do not understand the realm of God.
Right.
We do not understand what's going to happen when we cross over.
Right.
We have a guide for us in Christianity that is the example of Jesus Christ, that can help us build understanding. But within our generation, goodness gracious, within who knows when, we're told that the kingdom is at hand. But until we get on the same, wavelength with God, I think we might have some waiting to do. And so, to assume that we have all the answers really just put us in the same situation where you're like, oh, I want to help you. And I think I know everything that's wrong with
Right,
you.
and you
You're
don't.
just not listening.
Right, you don't. And I the last Pride Parade that we had here in St. Albans, I was one of the speakers. I helped as much as I can, and I saw people who love life, who are humans just like us. You see, there was a disagreement, but then they came and they talk and then come to a compromise. And there's no difference in human beings' interactions, whether it's from a church, it's more your personal belief. Or if you want to congregate in a church or in a body of people who despise another group of people because of whatever orientation.
Well, I think that human love and human hate are expressed in different ways.
Yes.
And we need to affirm human love, or we need to support human love
Yes.
as it's expressed in every human way. And we need to do our best to push back against human hate as this is expressed in every human way. And I think that we see that both in politics, we see it in sports, we see it in we see it in our we see it in all of our different communities, and we see it in church. And I think that we are in a place where we are hurting a lot.
Yes.
And I think that especially when we find ourselves personally hurting, it is easy to let our hate out. When we're in places where we are afraid, it's easy to let our hate out. Yoda would say, it is the dark side.
Yes, dark side.
And it's important for us to try to hold on to those loving expressions, even when we are afraid for ourselves, even when we ourselves are hurting, because being hateful towards other people is not going to help. I think, unfortunately, there are several ways in which people engage with faith. Some people engage with faith hoping to find all the answers that they need to make themselves feel more secure. But there are also those who engage with faith who are hoping that it can build them up into a person who is better able to express love. And don't get me wrong, I think that a lot of people who are looking for security feel that will help them better express love. But I belong to a tradition where the assumption is that we're never going to have the answer, and we always have to be working to become better people.
Yes.
And that's not how everybody engages with Christian faith.
But how do you see, like within the community in your church, is it divided in terms of who that is mindful and who would have an open mind? Because there's two different things.
Always.
You're mindful and then you have an open mind.
Always in different ways. I've served 5 churches at this point in my career, and the church that I'm in, while it there are people who have different politics, and there are people who have different ways of expressing their faith. And I think that one of the things that I have always seen, and it's actually a blessing to have this at my church, is we have, an ongoing struggling conversation between the younger people in the church
Yeah.
and how they want to express their faith and how they are able to engage with their faith with kids and work and all that stuff, and the older folks who are like, well, this is the way that we've always done things, why do you want to change it now? And that's a tough conversation too. But even though we're united by a single tradition, even there we have differences,
Right.
and we express our love differently, and we also have fear. A lot of our parents are afraid that they won't be able to engage with their faith the way in which they would like because of all the things that life throws at them.
Yeah.
And so they ask for help. And there are a lot of folks in the church who have been there a long time who are afraid that because what they're asking for is different, that means that they're going to have to change what they're used to. And that's happening in every single church that I know of. And there are different types of conversations that are happening throughout society. So I personally feel that we are in a situation where the LGBTQ plus community have finally gotten to a point where people are starting to listen to their calls for help. And in order to help, we have to be willing to accept some changes
Within
in ourselves.
Yes.
And I think that we owe that to a community of neighbors that need help.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're not growing to be the type of people who can welcome everybody.
Yes. All are welcome is something that we should not only have a sign flying over a town. All are welcome, and when in reality, we have to bring that now into action, because that's a call to action that all are welcome. And I often say that if you have a conversation, you realize how much commonalities there are in the different groups. However, because of misinformation that is more believable, some people will not peel back that onion.
Yes. And I think that misinformation is definitely something that we need to pay attention to.
Yes.
People profit from driving a wedge between communities.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to get too political, but I will recognize that we are not exempt from that here in Vermont.
No, we're not.
And so it is important to be mindful of the way the tone that is being set when we read information, especially when it comes to things around the LGBTQ, the assault on the civil liberties of the LGBTQ plus community, or the fear mongering around people who are homelessness, around people who are poor or homeless. There are always outside forces. And I think that the best way in which we can figure out, with these particular issues, we have the ability to get out of our homes and to engage with them directly, for the most part. If you're
mindful.
Forgive me. I married a woman who grew up in poverty, and she also points out that very, very often I will say stupid things without thinking about it. Not everybody has the liberty to be involved. So when I said that, I need to check myself, put myself into action. For those of us who have the freedom to get involved in advocacy for these groups, to get out of our homes and to get on the ground, we have the ability to sort of see whether or not the stories are true.
Yes.
And I would encourage that. I would encourage going to groups that are involved in this type of work and this type of advocacy and seeing for yourself whether or not what you're hearing is true. Because in doing that myself, I gotta say, it becomes very easy to see which stories are being spun when you are closer to the ground. So yes, that is a reality.
Yes, that's a reality that we all should be working on. And if you'd like to call in, the number is 802-528-5315. And we're so happy. This is such a candid conversation, a needed conversation, that we could keep certain topics. And so we're going to welcome call-ins, and the number is 802-528-5315. And so, as in case if anyone called, we could continue having this
Absolutely.
conversation. And my experience, especially with this last election, it was so divided. That I often would read stuff on social media and be like, Vermont is too small
Hmm.
for nasty politics, because at the end, we all got to coexist to exist when it's all finished.
Yeah, I think Vermont, for the most part, we still hold to an ideology of neighborliness. And while there definitely was a shift, especially in our state house, on social issues,
Yes.
I do think that for the most part, the vote that really spoke to me as a moral vote really showed that we still sort of hold to this idea of neighborliness. We
Yes.
want, I like to compare us to Spider-Man. We like to see ourselves as the friendly neighborhood
Yes.
state.
Yeah.
So out of the 50 states, I would say Vermont's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But again, I think that there is work that needs to be done there. Whether or not we actually are the friendly neighborhood state really depends on whether or not we're able to put those values into action. And so, yes, I agree with you. I think that the vote here in Vermont was different than what we've seen
Yes.
nationally. That doesn't mean that I think that we shouldn't be aware that things are getting tough. And as the gospel would put it, when things get tough, very often our hearts get hardened, and we become insensitive to the needs of our neighbors.
Yes. And that is why I believe that we should continue the conversations and not wait for it to pile up. And when there's election and you're going to, we just got to keep the conversation going and keep the vibe going.
Yeah. Well, and I also know that a lot of people in Vermont, after the election, now that we're past the election, are looking for ways in which they can get involved.
Yes.
And again, I think that we have so many opportunities here to, we have so many issues that need people to get involved here in Vermont. That this is a good time for us to sort of strengthen up our local safety nets.
Yes.
To get involved in state groups and local groups that are dealing with issues of poverty and civil liberties, and to really make it clear where we as a community stand.
Yes.
And also to talk with each other, so
Have
that we can build a little bit
conversations.
more sensitivity for where each other are coming from.
Yeah.
The thing that bothers me the most, I have to say, in particular about the issue of poverty, is seeing Vermonters turn on each other.
Yes.
And that is never something that I like to see. And it is something that sort of goes against the grain of what I grew up with around here.
Well, I've lived here for 23 years, and I've been through quite a few elections, and here in the state, as well as when I used to live in New York. And I can tell you from experience, what I was seeing was scary.
Yeah.
It was not what the Vermont that we portrayed outside. And so that is why conversations after that we should all, what I am doing too as well, is to examine from within.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did this make me feel, or what I'm not going to get involved in, and plan for the next. How
Yeah.
are we going to? What is it going to look like moving forward?
I think that that's where it starts.
Yes.
We need to really sort of examine ourselves. But honestly, I've also discovered that self-examination is not really something you can do alone. Sometimes you need somebody who is willing to point out the stupid stuff that you do.
We all do.
Very
stupid
often, that is my spouse, but also that is my church.
stuff. Yeah.
And I think having a group which can help you explore yourself is very valuable, because we all battle with this self-image of that we all have. And I'm fortunate, I have a very positive self-image that sometimes needs to be brought down a notch. My 10-year-old, no, she's 11, my 11-year-old does a good job of that.
Okay.
And, it's important to listen. It's
Yeah,
important to
yes,
listen
to
when
listen.
people tell you your flaws.
Yes.
And if you're able to hear that and do something about it, I think that really does allow you to better be a help to other people.
Yes. Yes. And that brings us to the end of another taping of Hey Neighbor Hey with Winnie Wilkinson. I want to thank our guest today for this candid conversation, and you could see the rerun on YouTube as well as Facebook, and we'll try to get it on Instagram as well and TikTok. We're working as a work in progress. This is new, and so we're doing it a step at a time. Well, once again, thank you, and our next taping is going to be on December 6th, and so we will keep just promoting that. And once again, thank you for listening to Hey Neighbor Hey with Winnie Wilkinson. Whew.